Okay, today I want to talk to you about sample SP001 inspection report I did about 3 months ago, back in March. First of all, if you're an API 653 inspector, you should really get the SP001 inspection license. It allows you to inspect cylindrical above ground tanks that are prefabricated. So all your like Highland tanks, all your cylindrical tanks that hold anywhere from as little as 55 gallons to as much as 12,000 gallons of fuel. Some even larger than that, but that's typically what you'll see is in gas stations that have above ground tanks will have to be inspected using the STI SP001 standard. So a lot of the fuel stations on military bases will have above ground station tanks. They're just pretty common. They're more common than API 653. Huge, fabricated welded tanks you see. So it's a good license to have. And if you have the 653, all you have to do is go on the website and take a course, like a little PowerPoint slide you go through, and then afterwards there's a 40 question exam test, and you gotta get 80% right. It's pretty easy. You'll have a lot of the resources there to answer it. You might have to buy the STP001 manual. I have it right here. When you buy it, though, it imprints your name and your copyright. I'm not gonna go through it, but it was, I don't know, be somewhere between 68 and 80 bucks. You need the standard if you're going to do the inspection. It references other standards as well, fire protection standards. But yeah, if you need to get the standard, the website's the way to do it. And if you don't have your API 653, I know you could take a course. I think it's like a 5-day course. I'm not sure how it works, but let's see. Here are some of the dates on the course. But it's a good inspection standard to have in your belt. Anyways, I'll pull up my sample STI inspection report I've done. So basically, you're gonna want to set up your Word document, and I blacked out all the personal information. So here you'll have your order number, service order number, your client's name, location, STI inspection report, prepared for who and support of who. Maybe you'll have the date on here as well. But yeah, basically you'll have the cover shot, maybe your company's logo up here, and you'll provide a picture of the tank. This was for a tank that was below a diesel generator tank. It was probably overkill to do a STI inspection report, but what you find is a lot of places are only insured if they have an independent inspector inspect them. So let's just go through the report real quick and see what we can learn. You got a table of contents. You're going to have your acronyms, your abbreviation, your general summary, your inspection date, any state regulations, any previous inspection dates, recommended future inspection dates, general tank information, general project information, your STI SP001's inspection, your site information, tank inspection comments, your construction, your foundation, your apparatus on your tank, your coating, your piping system, your fire protection system, your secondary containment system. Then you're going to find your deficiencies, your recommendations, the UFC 46001, because this was a military tank, your SPI resource, your fire protection resources, or even your API 63 resources to find deficiencies that the tank's not up to code with. Then you're going to want to provide recommendations on how to update and fix these. Mandatory repairs are repairs that you have to do now. Required repairs are repairs that you can do in the future, and then recommended repairs as part of regular maintenance is exactly what it says, what you do as part of your regular maintenance. Then you have your secondary containment. You could do a calculation on that to see if that's up to code. Your emergency venting requirements. If it's a NFPA regulation to have, certain tanks that have explosive properties and vapor pressures to have an emergency venting system. In this case, this tank did not, and it was out of code as a response to that. I'll show you how I did the calculation as well. Then you'll put your inspection list. The inspection list for STI is pretty easy to go through. I mean, you just check what they do. We'll go through the checklist as well. And then any containment, foundation, supports, cathodic protection, tank shells, heads, roof, tank equipment, insulated tanks, tank containment, leak detection, you know, all this is part of the inspection list. And then any photographs you're going to want to put at the end. So, you know, this is your abbreviations. This is just kind of a standard set of stuff you use. You could change this to anything that's in the report that you use as abbreviation. You just kind of want that as a reference there for people that may not be familiar with tanks to go to, so they can look at, you know, what you're talking about if you use abbreviation. All right, moving on. You could write just a general summary. Here we got the tank is located at blah blah blah. Is a welded steel rectangular generator fuel tank, stores diesel. Blah blah. You could talk about the housing below the generator and what building it's stored next to. You're going to want to talk about who manufactured the tank. In this case, it was Superior Tank. And you maybe even want to reach out and contact the company. Now, I contacted Superior Tank to try to get some as-built or some standard drawings for this tank, but the Superior Tank actually got merged with another company and they had no tank data. So that's something you want to do. You want to put the manufacturer down and you want to reach out and try to get drawings or any information on how they built these tanks. That will be helpful to you. You can put the inspection date. You put what standards it's up to. Any conclusions you had. You know, here it's 6th edition of SP001. Then you're going to want an inspection page. You put the date, you put your name, your certifications, any state regulations. You got to always check the state regulations because they could be a lot stricter than your STI codes or your API codes. So if the state regulations are stricter on certain tanks, this usually happens more with underground tanks, but even with above ground tanks, they might have, you know, leak detection requirements or other testing requirements that you want to make sure to check the site and actually reach out to the people and see how they handle inspections and whatnot. Then you want to do required future inspections. This one, they usually put 5 years to do external inspection. There was no requirements for internal inspection based on the SP001 standard. You got to check what category your tank. It's in the standard based on, you know, how flammable the tank is. And you're going to want to put, you know, just a general little table of what your tank is. Your owner, your location, your facility number, your tank name, tank number, state, county, city, inspection date, manufacturer design standard, construction. You know, this is where reaching out to the manufacturer will help. Contents was diesel, serial number, length, width, height, capacity, working capacity, which is 90% of the tank most of the time. What kind of foundation it was. This one was a plastic containment casing on a concrete slab. Construction, you know, single wall welded carbon steel. If you know the interior or exterior coating. Level gauging, this was just a manual gauge because it was a small tank, but sometimes you'll have automatic tank gauges in rafts and whatnot. Venting, you got a 2-inch vent, strapping shards, overfill protection. You know, this is such a simple tank that none of these were applicable, but if you do a bigger tank, you know, you're going to have your fill protection, you're going to have your overfill protection, your alarms, your high level alarms, and you'll put that information here. There was really no piping to this. This was really just a pour fill type tank. No level alarms. The plastic shell was actually the secondary containment. And here we go to the next page. You know, diesel tank, date, whatever. You filled it out. Site information, where the building was, where the tank was. Any tank inspection comments, you know, it's 105 gallon, dimensions, blah blah blah. Tank foundation, you'll put what foundation was concrete on this point. Any venting, emergency venting, had no emergency venting, no high level alarms. simple tank. You won't see that all the time, but for some of these smaller tanks you will. There wasn't really much of a coating system from what I could see. There was no pipe system. There was no fire protection. You need venting if you don't have any fire protection. Secondary containment had over the 110% capacity. And then we'll move on to the recommendation. So here's where you'll actually say what's wrong with the tank. Mandatory requirements, you'll quote the standard. This was like an NFPA standard and UFC standard that it will remain out of service until these repairs are completed. And this was an emergency vent. I calculated out a 3-inch emergency vent was needed. I think it might have even been 2 inches, but when I did the calculation, 3 inches was the only size available. So that's something I might want to go back and check. But yeah, then just regular repair requirements. I would like to see it coated and cleaned. Remove all the dust and give it a nice proper coating so it could last longer. And these are the references from the different standards you're going to put here, and then you're going to put your recommendation of what to do to bring this up to standard. More pictures of the tank. Of course, every time you make a recommendation, you show a picture of what you're talking about. Emergency vent labeling, that's another UFC UL 142-4811 standard, where it's going to say emergency vent label is going to say the tank requires emergency relief venting capacity not less than blah 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 CFH based on installation in 1 foot tank top. And regular maintenance, they weren't really taking any records of this tank, so I just said complete the STI inspection reports and keep that part of your records. Then you're gonna want your appendixes. I did my engineering calculations and drawings as my appendix A. This is where I did the secondary containment calculation. I took the dimensions of the shell and I made an assumption that 2/3 of the space, because there was a generator in there sitting on top of the tank, was dead wood. So I came out with 215 gallons, which was way more than 105 gallons. So it's pretty sufficient to hold the contents of the tank. This is where I did the emergency venting requirements. I did it based on the Morris Brothers venting guide for above ground storage tanks. You get a wetted area, then you determine a SCFH requirement based on that wetted area. And I pulled up their venting guide and went through their process of calculating emergency venting requirements. Of course, they show different vent selections based on horizontal cylindrical tank. They show you how to calculate for common sizes, wetted area on the table, calculate wetted areas, and then your requirement. And eventually you'll get to where you can select a vent. I can make a video of how I did that in the future if you would like to see that. Actually going through the process. And there's a lot of tables here. There's pre-calculated based on that. I mean, you can see the cylindrical tank I had was 105 gallons. So the lowest one on there was 280 gallons. And it required a 3-inch vent. So it's kind of what I went with. Because this was such a small tank. But you could see that the emergency vents can get up as high as 10 inches based on, the capacity of the tank. Or you could go between two areas and interpolate what size you need. But yeah, it came out to about 3 inches. Like I said, there probably are a little bit smaller vents they could have went with, but I just said go ahead and go with the 3 inches. And then here I drew out the tank configuration. Just get a CAD. I mean, this one was pretty simple. You got the tank dimensions and all your nozzles on the tank. You had the generator sitting on top, so I put the support legs where the support legs were, and then the battery, and then there was a fuel intake, a fuel gauge, a tank fill cap, a tank gauge with a dip tube, and a tank vent. Not the emergency vent, but normal tank operation vents. Then for Appendix B, you're going to put the actual checklist from STI SP001. You could find this, just type in the SPI SP001 formal external inspection tank, and you could go through and fill out. It's a rectangular tank, blah blah blah, diesel contents, concrete containment, and you just go out and you fill out the checklist as you go. You got a section for tank containment, tank foundation and support, cathodic protection. There was no cathodic protection on this tank shells, head and roof. Another section for tank equipment. There's no solenoid valves, there's no fire shear valves, there's no leak detection on this or anything like that. Strainers, filters. I will go over a more complicated inspection report, but I figure this would be a good place to start. And as my career grows and I become more knowledgeable, I'll be able to better fill out these inspection lists as well. There's a monthly inspection list. The last one was the annual inspection list. And then at the end, you're going to want to put your pictures, your pictures of your tank. I took the nameplate off for privacy reasons, but yeah, there's the tank. There's the generator sitting on top of the tank. And yeah, all your pictures to kind of explain how the tank looks. Like I said, this was a pretty simple inspection. It didn't take long because it was just a 55-gallon tank. For some of the other tanks, you're going to want to do UT readings on it, and you're going to want to draw out, UT diagrams and do corrosion rates and whatnot. But for this simple tank, that's just all I had for it. And hopefully, you learned something, and hopefully you saw something useful. But yeah, that was one of my first inspection reports, and I'll have more in the future to hopefully bring the community together. If you like and subscribe to the channel, hopefully I could build up a base and get to the point where I could, have live streams and communities and stuff and really help people out. So for now, that's all I have for you.